Today, the message is simple, Bolt fam. The Chargers are hitting that point on the calendar where one bad read can cost you a season. We've got quarterback smoke that could shake up the draft, possible swings at star power, a pass rush situation that could change the whole ceiling of this defense, and market signals nobody in Los Angeles can afford to ignore. But let's keep it honest, because not all of this is locked-in fact. If it's rumor, projection, or mock draft smoke, I'm calling it exactly that. What matters is figuring out where Joe Hortiz could really strike and where the smoke might just be fool's gold. Subscribe and let's get into it. A lot of people are looking at this Ty Simpson buzz only through the quarterback lens, but the part that should matter most to the Chargers might be something totally different and way smarter. If his value really keeps climbing and some franchise gets desperate enough to jump back into the end of round 1, Los Angeles could turn pick 22 into a weapon. That is not a confirmed trade. That is a draft board read based on mock draft logic and market projection. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of move that makes sense for a team with only a handful of picks and a bunch of real needs. In that kind of scenario, the Chargers slide down to 34, grab 65, and still pick up future capital. That changes the whole conversation. Instead of forcing a pick at 22 just to look aggressive, they'd add volume, stay in range for top 100 talent, and put themselves in position to keep attacking the board without panic. That's how strong rosters get built. No fear, no vanity, no chasing headlines just to win Twitter for one night. And the names tied to that mock make the whole thing even more interesting. Emmanuel Prednion from Oregon shows up as a physical, nasty guard, the kind of trench player that screams Chargers football. Some people might call it a reach on internet boards, but internet boards don't move defenders off the ball on Sundays. If this front office sees him as a young starter who can toughen up the interior offensive line, then that's the only opinion that matters. Then you get Gabe Jacas out of Illinois, and this fit jumps off the page too. Tui Polo 2 is rising fast. Khalil Mack still commands respect, but this team has to think one step ahead. They need the next edge in the rotation, the next jolt of juice, the next player who keeps this pass rush from falling off a cliff once age and contract realities start kicking the door down. Jacas brings production, versatility, and even gets a Matthew Judon comparison. For a front office led by Joe Hortiz, that is not some throwaway detail. Josiah Trotter and Connor Lew come in as long play pieces. One gives you linebacker depth and developmental upside at a spot that still has questions. The other, coming off injury, would clearly be a patience pick for the future, and that only becomes realistic if the trade back actually happens. And that's the heart of the story. This scenario is not exciting because of Ty Simpson himself. It's exciting because it shows how the Chargers could squeeze real value out of somebody else's desperation. Now let me be blunt, because this Kayvon Thibodeaux conversation cannot be handled like fantasy football brain. If there really is a chance the Giants start listening to offers, the Chargers have to keep tabs on it. They have to. But keeping tabs is not the same thing as diving in blindly. Keeping tabs means asking whether the talent is worth the full blast, the trade and the extension. Without both, forget it. The starting point is easy. Khalil Mack can still play and still deserves major respect. Tui Polo 2 just broke out in a huge way. But the team lost Odafe Owe, and they cannot sit around pretending that hole will magically fill itself. So when a high upside edge with top 5 pedigree and real physical ceiling starts hovering around the market, the conversation has to happen. But there's a trap here, and it's obvious. If Los Angeles repeats the same pattern of betting on a pass rusher and then getting cold feet when it's time to pay him, we've seen that movie before, and nobody wants the sequel. That's why this possibility has to be read the right way. The report being cited says it's when, not if, on a trade. That is market opinion, not confirmation. It also matters that Thibodeaux has missed games and seen his production dip over the last couple of years. So no, you cannot sell him as some automatic fix. The name is big, the draft status is big, but the real cost is not just the pick you send to New York. The real bill starts the second you decide you're willing to write the next contract. If the Chargers believe the right environment, the right rotation, and the right structure could unlock this guy again, then yes, now we're talking. Because then you're not just buying old sacks. You're buying age, explosiveness, and the possibility of building a pass rush trio that keeps this defense violent for years. But if the idea is to trade for him and then hesitate when it's time to commit, don't even pick up the phone. That's the honest debate. It's not, would Kayvon look good with the Chargers? Of course he would. The real question is this: would Joe Hortiz be willing to go all the way on the same kind of bet? If the answer is no, then this is just more April noise in shoulder pads. And then we get to the name that instantly sends every fan's brain into overdrive, A.J. Brown. But let me be clear right now, I'm not selling fantasy just to farm comments. As of today, this is still smoke, projection, and market reading. The idea of a trade is still rumor, and the whole theory that Philadelphia might be lining up life after Brown depends on signals that have not become official action. That said, pretending this doesn't matter would be clueless. The Chargers know this offense still needs more weight around Justin Herbert, and once Quentin Johnston's future starts being questioned, the whole conversation jumps to another level. This isn't just about adding another wideout. This is about asking whether there's a true alpha receiver out there who can change coverage rules, bend defensive fear, and lift the entire ceiling of the offense. A.J. Brown is that kind of player. Even in what people called a down season by his standards, the production still spoke loudly. So yes, the appeal is real, and it's obvious. But the serious part of this story lives in Philadelphia. If the Eagles use a premium draft pick on a receiver, that could be read as a transition signal. Could be, not proof. Omar Cooper Jr. showed up as an ideal fit in a projected draft piece, but projection doesn't sign paperwork, doesn't complete a trade, and doesn't shove a veteran out the door. What it does do is flash a warning light, and that is exactly where the Chargers need to be: alert, calm, and ready to react if the market really cracks open. At the same time, let's say the quiet part out loud. Based on how this offseason has gone, Los Angeles does not look like a team itching to jump into an expensive bidding war for a superstar. This front office has been careful, selective, and way less impulsive than the fan base would probably like in certain spots. So if anybody tries to frame the Chargers as favorites for Brown right now, that's irresponsible. But acting like they should ignore it completely is lazy too. Because if a receiver of that caliber actually shakes free after June 1, this becomes more than rumor. It becomes a test of ambition, a test of conviction, a test of how much this franchise truly believes Justin Herbert is one piece away from another dimension. I want to hear from you. If A.J. Brown really hit the market, would you go all in? Or would you stay cold and trust the front office's slower approach? Dexter Lawrence is the kind of name that makes the fan base freeze for 5 seconds and dream about a defense that could wreck games like a tidal wave. And I get it completely. The second the report drops that he asked the Giants for a trade after contract talks stalled, the first reaction is automatic. Put that monster in the middle, pair him with Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipolotu, and turn this Chargers front into a nightmare factory. As a football fantasy, it's electric. As a realistic read on what this front office would actually do, the temperature drops fast. Because with this one, liking the player is not enough. You have to look at the front office's DNA, and everything Joe Hortiz has shown since taking over points in the other direction. First, the entry fee. Lawrence would not come cheap. Depending on the bidding war, you could be talking about a second-round pick plus extra compensation, and there's always a chance some desperate team pushes the price even higher. For a team already working with limited draft capital, that is a massive deal. Not some footnote, a central piece of the whole equation. And the cost doesn't stop there. Trading for Lawrence without a new deal would be pointless. So this move would almost certainly come packaged with a heavyweight contract, probably near the top of the market for the position. And that is exactly the type of outside commitment the Chargers have been avoiding. This team has been disciplined, patient, and almost stubborn about protecting picks, comp pick value, and future flexibility. Some people call that conservative. In some moments, I've wanted them to be more aggressive too. But the pattern is impossible to miss. And when a pattern is this obvious, the analysis has to respect it. You cannot act like every big name that comes loose automatically becomes a real Chargers target. Lawrence is dominant, disruptive, and absolutely could raise the physical ceiling of this defense. Nobody serious would argue that. The problem is that Los Angeles seems to believe more in stacking value, exploiting smaller windows, and pouncing on cheaper opportunities than in paying twice for an established veteran, once in picks and again in cash. That is why this story messes with fans so much. It makes perfect sense on the field and almost no sense in the team-building philosophy. The football fit is magnetic, but the front office identity pushes the idea out the door. And honestly, until this regime shows otherwise with real action, the smartest way to read Dexter Lawrence to the Chargers is as a loud dream, not a hot trail. The temptation is real. It just doesn't look like their temptation. At the end of the day, the picture is pretty clear. The Chargers are sitting in the middle of a market full of temptation, but the biggest question is not who's available. The biggest question is who actually fits the way this franchise wants to win. The Ty Simpson mock draft angle could create real value if a trade back opens up. Kayvon Thibodeaux only makes sense if the team is willing to back it up with contract conviction. A.J. Brown is still living in monitored rumor territory. Dexter Lawrence pulls at the heart, but right now he feels like a direct clash with the front office's philosophy. And that's where fans need to stay locked in, because the loudest move is not always the smartest move. If you want to follow this war room drama all the way to the draft, subscribe to the channel and tell me which one of these 4 stories could change the Chargers' future the most.